Thank you both. That was beautiful. And because our guest speaker today is doing this for the first time here, I want to say a few words about him. We are going to have J.T. Ramelis give us a message on the power of the mind. And I met J.T. a couple months ago when he invited the Interfaith Center to come to one of his wisdom circles and speak about what we do here at Interfaith. What is Interfaith? And, lo and behold, JT, it turns out, has a very long history of his spiritual journey, very active spiritual journey. He is currently a chaplain with a number of veterans groups and does, mental health work with them. He's been a church pastor, a long-term student of A Course in Miracles, Qigong, and various meditation practices. And he is soon to be ordained. More on that. But we're just delighted that, since we met and Dave Bell and JT had met online prior to that, he's been coming to our center, and so we're delighted to have him share his message with us today. So come on up, JT.
Thank you. My name is J.T. Ramelis. I know people get that mixed up sometimes. What was that, BJ or something like that, or HP? So if it helps you remember, my mom was a Southerner, and J.T. is for Jim Tom. So, they like those Jim Bobs and all that sort of things. So, this is my first time to speak here. Thank you for that opportunity. I'm going to speak on power of the mind. And I've been a long-term student of science of the mind and Ernest Holmes. I picked an easy first subject because I teach this subject at the Flint VA. I work there one day a week. I do spiritual counseling. I teach power of the mind as part of the whole health program. And I teach meditation and Qigong to stressed out veterans. I've been fascinated by the psycho-spiritual since I was a young man. Like many, I was in Vietnam at 19, and I was taught to meditate for the first time by a Vietnamese monk in the same order as Thich Nhat Hanh. If any of you are familiar with meditation techniques or Buddhism, Thich Nhat Hanh is a famous monk, and he's in his last days right now. I took martial arts training at the same time from some Koreans nearby, so that all kind of fit together in a synchronistic sort of way. I was there late in the war, not really out in the jungle. I wasn't Rambo, and as I was a personnel specialist, and later got my first taste of psychiatric social work, detoxing drug-addicted vets. So as veterans say, I was in the rear with the gear, but that's a good place to be in a war. I was there 13 months, though, and that does give me some respect and street credibility with the veterans I work for. There's a term called the placebo effect that any of you are in medicine or studies of science of the mind or power of the mind. And the placebo effect was the subject of an interesting book by a fellow named Joe Dispenza. I actually brought it with me. If any of you are interested later and you want to get a spelling of the name or anything, and the placebo effect actually had its origins on the battlefield, somewhat vaguely related to what I'm doing. Field surgeons in World War II ran out of painkillers for some of the vets as they were wounded in battle, and they started using saline injections. They didn't tell the wounded combatants that they were getting a saline injection and not the real thing, a real painkiller. For those of you who take prescription drugs or administer them or are in the medical field, you know that our prescription drugs we take are tested against something called a placebo. And some subjects are given a sugar pill with no therapeutic value, and others are given the real thing to demonstrate the efficacy or the effectiveness of the real medicine. And it's compared, so they say, here's our new drug, and here's the placebo effect, and as compared to the placebo effect, our new drug did better or did worse, and if it did worse, it's out of there. But the point here is, what about this placebo effect? Some people take this sugar pill and they get better because they tell them that they don't know that they're not getting the real drug. They actually have the same effects as the real drug. How did they do it? Because their mind told them, if you're taking an anti-anxiety agent, their mind told them, you're going to be less anxious if you take this pill. So even though the pill was just, 5 grams of sugar and it tasted good and they liked it, they got better. And that's part of the power of the mind and the idea behind Dr. Dispenza's book, You Are the Placebo. We can't grow a limb back, no matter how positive we think, but there are some that say it's we may have the DNA. There's some little, critters, amphibious type critters in the ocean and that sort of thing that can grow limbs back. We've got the same DNA set up as they do. It's just never been done. And in the fields and realms of all possibilities, might it be done someday? It might be done someday. As of right now, it hasn't happened yet. We can't undo a traumatic brain injury. We can't make bad past experiences that already happened just go away. So for some of these vets I work with, we can't make what they happened to them in Iraq just go away. Or if you've been in a terrible car accident, or a frequent sexual assault, sexual trauma it also has a close relationship to PTSD. We can't make them go away, but we can move towards wholeness and recovery using the power of our minds and lead happy lives. Diseases and disabilities can be lived with and overcome via the power of the mind. The Asians have seen the body as an integral whole for thousands of years. The term we're starting to use in the West is holistic health. That's the approach to health that we're complete beings, not separate little parts. That's always been and for you philosophical scholars, the Cartesian way of looking. Everything's separate. Everything's, there's mind, there's body, there's spirit, there's body, it's all separate. And they're finally starting to come around to the Asian point of view, is it's all one big whole. And for the VA to recognize that, I don't know if there's any other vets out there, but that's really incredible because the VA is not a progressive organization. So for the VA to say, and I suspect it has something to do with money. Somebody has figured out that in the long run, they're going to save money with this holistic approach because it works. And, in macho veteran first responder police type terms, it's the way you cope with stress is you drink heavily. And then, as a matter of fact, I was putting up some brochures for my program in some of these veterans organizations, VFWs and that sort of thing, and somebody said, I had a Vietnam hat and pin on to go in there, and they said, I see you're a Vietnam vet. And I said, you want to know how to cope with stress? Sit down and I'll buy you a drink. And that's the norm. Then the problem is it's called eating the gun. They have too much to drink, and this is the way they cope. They eat the gun, and police officers and veterans both use that term. I did a little work with first responders, too. So in the 70s, Dr. Herbert Benson taught the relaxation response as a way of coping with stress and anxiety. I was working for mental health in the 90s, and I stuck to relaxation response. You couldn't call it meditation back then, and I was in the conservative North Country, and that was a good way to keep the heat off. It's not religion, it's the relaxation response, but it's really a form of concentrative meditation. The relaxation response, as put forth by Benson, was a form of mantric concentrative, where you pick a word, love and peace, or a phrase, and you concentrate on your word or your mantra, and eventually you start to forget about all your problems, and you focus in on the here and the now. As I mentioned, I teach veterans a form of Qigong, which is a lot like Tai Chi, which most of you have either seen it on TV, or you've actually practiced it yourself. I know there's a lot of intelligent, forward people that are involved in a lot of things here, and some of you have probably did Qigong or Tai Chi. And the difference between Qigong and Tai Chi is kind of, Qigong is more of a broad term that involves various different kinds of medicine. What I teach is something called the 18-form Qigong, which is a lot like Tai Chi. So for those of you that have had Tai Chi, you know that it gets a little complicated. As your left hand goes forward, as your right hand goes up, as your right foot goes forward, as this arm comes up, as your arms go back, and you do that. And the trouble with that is that after a while, when you're on your own, you forget it. And so I had Tai Chi lessons like 3 or 4 times, and a few months after I stopped my lessons, I'm going, my foot goes up, and how am I supposed to do with this arm? Do I go like that, or do I go like that? I forgot. And if you notice that you see the films of the Chinese, is they're in a large group, and there's some leaders or models up front. So you just look to the side if you forgot what to do, and you move with the rest of the people, and you can see the models. And the Qigong is more medical in its aspect. Tai Chi actually leads to Kung Fu and the martial art. The Qigong is more medical in its aspect, and it's one movement at a time. So after a while, after a few months of doing this, the person can go home and do it themselves. So you have one movement. So in Americans, we always want to go too fast because it's exercise. But you got to remember that this is also psychological, and developing your chi. It's moving meditation. So you walk like this, and the next one is like this. So it's one step at a time. Somebody mentioned being in a hurry. So we're always in a hurry. So that's really usually the hardest challenge for Americanos is we're not going to be in a hurry. We're going to take our time, and we're going to do this effectively and correctly, and pay attention to detail. And you get lost in the moment when you do that. That's why it's a form of mindfulness. If you're paying attention to detail, then your mind's not boing, 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 boing. So post-traumatic stress is actually a form of anxiety related to a past event. So if someone's present in the now, they're not living in the past. Mindfulness meditation, and we teach it, I teach it because it's approved by the VA, it's got to be real neutral. And we just teach, watch, much like the meditation we had this morning, you watch the breath, and, Qigong, yoga, and other activities that bring them back to the moment. They're using various forms of yoga too, by the way, and with some degree of success. Thus, for my veterans, they're not back in Vietnam, Afghanistan, or Iraq, because if you're here, now, in the present moment, then you're not back there reliving your past trauma. So, and all of these various mind-body techniques develop this chi or ki, or what the Asian Indians call prana. So I give a demonstration with wires to illustrate the energy or power of the mind. I want you to know I've never been trained in magic, and there's no trick to this. And I was a snowbird for a few years. We lived up. My wife's here with me today, and we lived up north a long time. And we snowbirded in Florida a few years, and I made the rounds of the New Thought churches during those winters, the Unity and the religious sciences, and this was going around at the time. And I went home back to the UP, and there's not a lot to do in the rural UP. So I said, well, I'll just sit around and see if I can make wires move with my mind. There's nothing else to do. And I'm not really smart enough to think of this on my own. If this was making the rounds because it was in an interesting book by a woman named Pam Grout. It was called E Squared, and she gives you 9 experiments that you can do to prove the power of your mind. If there's any doubts in yourself that you don't have the power of the mind, she gives you 9 experiments. This is one of them, and that's why I was making the rounds at the New Thought churches where I was visiting. The veterans like this because they actually see something. They see something physical, where these are people that are used to action, and this is more than words, and so they like this, and it demonstrates to them that there's some talk to this energy and power of the mind stuff. I did these as a church pastor, and the adults a few times, and at some library talk groups, and the adults would say, there's some kind of trick to this stuff. He's doing something. But some of the kids would say, I can do that. Let me try. And they do it, and energy healers too. Reiki, healing touch type people can do this also. And there's no trick to it. The only trick to it is if I squeeze these too much, they won't move, or if I hold them too loosely, they'll flop around. So all this is some straws and some thin coat hangers wires that I cut up, and I will make these move using only the power of my mind. When I lie and positive or tell the truth, they expand and go out. When I lie or am negative, they go inward. When I'm positive and tell the truth, they expand because the truth is expansive. I'm lying. My name is Ronaldo Von Epstein. I live in Toledo, Ohio. I push drugs for a living. I have 14 kids and 7 wives. My name is J.T. Ramelis. I live south of Fenton. I have three children. I'm semi-retired and do crazy things like this in my spare time. And I'm married to Paula. So that was the truth. Now here's one I show my veterans. So they kind of get this. I will be positive first. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served 2 years in the United States Army. I was okay with serving in the line of American soldiers. I got the GI Bill. I got a VA home loan. I currently work with veterans and help stressed out PTSD people. And that was the truth. Here's the negative. Vietnam was a political war. I don't think we ever should have got involved. There's a lot of people that were seriously damaged, and so forth. So you get the idea. But anyway, my mind moved those wires around, my energy. So they like that because they like to see things. It isn't just words. Let's see. Now, what about you? Here's some questions for you to think about related to power of the mind. What are the sources of stress in your life? Is money a source of stress? Is your physical health a source of stress? Is your mental health a source of stress? Do your habits cause you stress? Smoking, alcohol, overeating, gambling. Is the health of people around you a source of stress? Being a caregiver is extremely stressful. That's when I do these things for the veterans, I open it up to the caregivers too, and the people who take care of these people. And anybody that's ever taken care of like someone that's terminal or seriously mentally ill, they've got a job. How do you manage your stress? What are your coping mechanisms? Is your coping mechanisms like my police officers and veterans? Or do you have positive coping mechanisms like yoga and meditation and Qigong? How do you relax? Do you meditate or have another mindfulness type technique? After many years of practicing and teaching meditation, I know that there's some people who cannot meditate. They just cannot sit still and be quiet. They can't do it. And for these type of people, the hatha yoga is where you do the asanas, and I find the idea of doing Hatha yoga to mantras, an interesting sort of thing. These are the people that need to do the Tai Chi, they need to do the Qigong, they need to do yoga, they need to go for long walks in the woods or develop a hobby or activity that gives them peace. Everybody is not, and I get that, everybody is not going to meditate. Do you pray? Who do you pray to? How do you pray? Is it always petitionary prayer where you ask God to give you something, or are you quiet sometimes? As a Hebrew Bible verse says, be still and know that I'm God. Do you get past, oh Lord, give me this, and oh Lord, give me that, and oh Lord, give me the other things? As Janis Joplin said, oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Do you get past that? What practices have you tried in the past? What works, what doesn't work? Some things just don't work for certain people. So see, this Qigong is very good for seniors, whereas these slow, careful movements. I'll give you 10 mind-body techniques that have proven efficacy in developing the power of your mind. That means they, like the placebo there, they've been tested and they worked. Cognitive behavioral therapy. That's sometimes combined with pharmaceuticals. That's talk therapy. It helps some people. They talk through their problems. There's dozens of various forms of cognitive behavioral therapy out there, but they can really help you out. Recently I took a course in positive psychology from the U of M Lifelong Learning, what they call OLI, and they're very good. And I took a course in positive psychology where Deleth was talking about, she first met me. And the idea is, as the Bible says, as a person thinks, so shall they be. It emphasizes and promotes positive mental qualities. What are your strengths? What do you want to do in life? So if I get somebody, they don't want to quit smoking, they're not going to quit smoking, it'd be good for their health if they quit smoking, they're not going to quit smoking. That's just the way it is. But they have other positive attributes. Maybe we can minimize the smoking. They want to live long enough to play with their grandchildren, that sort of thing. Positive affirmations and self-talk can be effective. If you keep telling yourself you're happy, healthy, and holy, your subconscious eventually starts to believe it. It's like a muscle or something. And that's one of my favorite easy ones. I'm strong mentally, physically, and spiritually. Excuse me, throat's getting a little dry. Autogenic training, or AT, you use progressive relaxation, and you use phrases, and you combine the phrases with muscle tension and relaxation. Biofeedback, most of you have heard of biofeedback. They hook a bunch of machines up to you, and if you have experienced emotions and thoughts, they see what makes you mad. So you can say, so if they say Donald Trump, and they've got you all wired up, and all those numbers start going haywire, you've got a problem with Donald Trump. Maybe you need to think of a more peaceful way to cope with that. My wife's looking at me; she knows. Breathing exercises. The famous one is the 4-7-8 breath, which I practice, and I give that to some veterans and other clients. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. And for you scientific types, it has something to do with that CO2 stuff, because when you breathe in for 4 and then you breathe out for 8, the CO2 is exactly, the breaths are exactly twice as long, and after a while you've got to get relaxed. You can use that to go to sleep too. Our son's an Oakland County deputy sheriff, and he came and he gave me this breathing technique. It's really simple. They're teaching this to deputies now, to breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and it does calm you down. And they focus. If you're getting ready to go off and you're going to get mad and you're going to take it out on some sales clerk because they got the bill wrong or something, it's like breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, then go talk to the sales clerk. Hypnosis. I know I'm a hypnotherapist, and it's a thin line between a lot of these. Hypnotherapy, visualization, breathing. It's a thin line. Positive affirmations. I mean, you can almost hypnotize yourself and give yourself positive affirmations. Art therapy. A lot of people, they can lose themselves in art. Imagery, the guided imagery, where you visualize yourself being whole and healthy and jumping up and down and clicking your heels. It works in sports, where these guys visualize themselves hitting home runs and throwing the ball and getting it over the plate or making the touchdown and this sort of thing. It works for business. Journaling, writing it out. Write out your thoughts and your dreams and your anger, and journal as you go along. For meditation, we touched on that. Progressive muscle relaxation, that's the stuff where you tense your forearm, relax your forearm, that kind of thing. And that's closely related to that autogenic training. What's the point? I always usually conclude with what's the point, because a lot of people I know go to these services and they say, I don't know, this guy talked for a half hour or something. I don't know. I never did get it. What's the point? I don't know what he's trying to say. I don't know. Well, the point is, you can be the placebo. You're a divine being. You can do all sorts of amazing things. In place of that sugar pill, you can train your mind to heal yourself, to make life better, and through conditioning, through proper training. And that's the point. Thank you for having me.